Καλησπέρα και καλώς ήρθατε σε άλλη μια λέξη εκφραστικής αναγνώσης εν μέσω κορονοϊού 2022. In Blyton, the Castle of Adventure. 1. Now for the holidays. Two girls sat on a window seat in their school study. One had red wavy hair and so many freckles that it was impossible to count them. The other had dark hair that stuck up in front in an amusing tuft. "One more day and then the halls begin," said red-haired Lucy-Anne, looking at Dinah out of curious green eyes. "I'm longing to see Jack again. A whole term is an awfully long time to be away from him." "Well, I don't mind being away from my brother," said Dinah with a laugh. "Philip's not bad, but he does make me wild, always bringing in those awful animals and insects of his." "It's a good thing there's only one day between our breaking up days," said Lucy-Anne. "We shall be home first, and we can have a look around, and then the next day we shall meet the boys. Hurrah! I wonder what this place is like that Mother has taken for the Holts," said Dinah. "I'll get out her letter and read it again." She fished in her pocket for the letter and took it out. She skimmed it through. She doesn't say very much, only that she wants our home to be decorated and cleaned, and so she has taken a cottage somewhere in the hills for us to stay in these halls, said Dinah. "Here's the letter." Lucy-Anne took it and read it with interest. Yes, it's a place called Spring Cottage, and it's on the side of Castle Hill. She says it's rather a lonely sort of place, but packed with wild birds, so Jack will be very pleased. "I can't understand your brother being so mad on birds," said Dinah. "He's just as bad about birds as Philip is about insects and animals." "Philip is marvellous with animals, I think," said Lucy-Anne, who had a great admiration for Dinah's brother. "Do you remember that mouse he trained to take crumbs from between his teeth?" "Oh, don't remind me of those things," said Dinah with a shudder. She could not bear even a spider near her, and bats and mice made her squeal. Lucy-Anne thought it was amazing that she should have lived so many years with an animal-loving boy like Philip, and yet still be afraid of things. "He does tease you, doesn't he?" she said to Dinah, remembering how Philip had often put earwigs on Dinah's pillow and black beetles in her shoes. He really was a terrible tease when he was in the mood. No wonder Dinah had such a temper. "I wonder how Kiki has got on this term," said Dinah. Kiki was Jack's parrot, an extremely clever bird, who could imitate voices and sounds in a most remarkable manner. Jack had taught her many phrases, but Kiki had picked up many, many more herself, especially from a cross old uncle that Lucy-Anne and Jack had once lived with. "Kiki wasn't going to be allowed to be at school with Jack this term," Lucy-Anne said Lucy-Anne sadly. "It's an awful pity, but still he got a friend in the town to look after her for him, and he goes to see her every day. But I do think they might have let him have her at school." Well, considering that Kiki kept telling the headmaster not to sniff and Jack's form master to wipe his feet and woke everyone up at night by screeching like a railway engine, "I'm not surprised they didn't want Kiki this term," said Dinah. "Anyway, we'll be able to have her for the Holes, and that will be nice. I really do like Kiki. She doesn't seem like a bird, but like one of us, somehow." Kiki certainly was a good companion. Although she didn't converse with the children properly, she could talk 19 to the dozen when she wanted to, saying the most ridiculous things and making the children laugh till they cried. She adored Jack and would sit quietly on his shoulder for hours if he would let her. The girls were glad that the holidays were so soon coming. They and the two boys and Kiki would have good fun together. Lucy-Anne especially looked forward to being with Dinah's pretty merry mother. Jack and Lucy-Anne Trent had no father or mother and had lived with a cross old uncle for years, until by chance they had met Philip and Dinah Mannering. These two had no father, but they had a mother who worked hard for them. She worked so hard that she had no time to make a home for them, so they were sent to boarding school, and in the holidays went to an aunt and uncle. But now things were changed. Dinah's mother had enough money to make a home for them, and had offered to have their great friends Jack and Lucy-Anne as well. So in term time the two girls went to school together, and the two boys were at another school. In the holidays all four joined up with Mrs. Mannering, the mother of Philip and Dinah. "No more uncles and aunts," said Dinah joyfully, who hadn't much liked her absent-minded old Uncle Jocelyn. "Just a lovely home with my mother." Now, in the coming holidays they were all to be together in this holiday cottage that Mrs. Mannering had found. Although Dinah was a little disappointed at not going back to the home her mother had made for them all, she couldn't help looking forward to the holiday cottage. It sounded nice, and what fine walks and picnics they would have among the hills. "Do you remember that marvellous adventure we had last summer?" she said to Lucy-Anne, who was looking dreamily out of the window, thinking how lovely it would be to see her brother Jack the day after next. Lucy-Anne nodded. "Yes," she said, and she screwed up her freckled nose a little. "It was the most exciting adventure anyone could have. But oh dear, how afraid I was sometimes. That Isle of Gloom. Do you remember it, Dinah?" "Yes, and that shaft going right down into the heart of the earth. And how we got lost there. Golly, that was an adventure," said Dinah. "I wouldn't mind having another one, really." "You are funny," said Lucy-Anne. "You shiver and shake when you see a spider, but yet you seem to enjoy adventures so exciting that they make me tremble even to remember them." "Well, we shan't have any more," said Dinah rather regretfully. "One adventure like that is enough for a lifetime, I suppose. I bet the boys will want to talk about it again and again. Do you remember how in the Christmas holes we couldn't make them stop?" "Oh, I wish the holes would come quickly," said Lucy-Anne, getting off the window seat restlessly. "I don't know why these last 2 or 3 days always drag so." But tomorrow came at last, and the 2 girls went off in the train with scores of their friends, chattering and laughing. Their luggage was safely in the van, their tickets were in their purses, their hearts beat fast in delight. Now for the holidays. They had to change trains twice, but Dinah was good at that sort of thing. Lucy-Anne was timid and shy in her dealings with strangers, but 12-year-old Dinah stood no nonsense from anyone. She was a strapping, confident girl, well able to hold her own. Lucy-Anne seemed 2 or 3 years younger to Dinah, although actually there was only 1 year between them. At last they were at the station for their holiday home. They leapt out and Dinah found the one and only porter. He went to get their luggage. "There's Mother!" shouted Dinah, and rushed to her pretty, bright-eyed mother, who had come to meet them. Dinah was not one to hug or kiss very much, but Lucy-Anne made up for that. Dinah gave her mother one quick peck of a kiss, but Lucy-Anne gave her a bear hug and rubbed her red head happily against Mrs. Mannering's chin. "Oh, it's lovely to see you again," she said, thinking for the 100th time how lucky Dinah was to have a mother of her own. She felt grateful to her for letting her share her. It wasn't very nice having no father or mother to write to you or welcome you home, but Mrs. Mannering always made her feel that she loved her and wanted her. "I've got the car outside to meet you," said Mrs. Mannering. "Come along, the porter will bring your luggage." They went out of the station. It was only a little country station. Outside was a country lane, its banks starred with spring flowers. The sky was blue and the air was warm and soft. Lucy-Anne felt very happy. It was the first day of the holidays. She was with Dinah's lovely mother, and tomorrow the boys came home. They got into the little car and the porter put the trunks in at the back. Mrs. Mannering took the wheel. "It's quite a long way to Spring Cottage," she said. "We have to fetch our own goods and food from the village here, except for eggs and butter and milk, which a nearby farm lets me have. But it's lovely country and there are marvellous walks for you. As for birds, well, Jack will have the time of his life. It's nesting time too. He'll be thinking of nothing but eggs and nests," said Lucy-Anne, feeling just a little jealous of the bird life that took up so much of her brother's time. The girls looked round them as Mrs. Mannering drove along. It certainly was a lovely country. It was very hilly, and in the distance the hills looked blue and rather exciting. The car ran along a road down a winding river valley, and then began to climb a steep hill. "Oh, is our cottage on the side of this hill?" asked Dinah, thrilled. "What a lovely view we'll have, Mother." "We have, right across the valley to other hills, and yet more hills rising beyond them," said her mother. The car had to go very slowly now, for the road was steep. As they rose higher and higher, the girls could see more and more across the valley. Then Lucy-Anne glanced upwards to see how high they were, and she gave a shout. "I say, look at that castle on the top of the hill! Just look at it!" Dinah looked. It certainly was a most imposing and rugged old castle. It had a tower at each end, and its walls looked thick. It had slit windows, but it had wide ones too, which looked a little odd. "Is it a really old castle?" asked Lucy-Anne. "No, not really," said Mrs. Mannering. "Some of it is old, but most of it has been restored and rebuilt, so that it is a real mix-up. Nobody lives there now. I don't know who it belongs to either. No one seems to know or care. It's shut up and hasn't a very good name. Why, did something horrid happen there once? Asked Dinah, feeling rather thrilled. I think so, said her mother, but I really don't know anything about it. You'd better not go up there anyhow, because the road up to it has had a landslide or something, and is very dangerous. They say that part of the castle is ready to slip down the hill. Gracious, I hope it won't slip on to our cottage, said Lucy-Anne, half scared. Mrs. Mannering laughed. Of course not. We are nowhere near it. Look, there's our cottage, tucked away among those trees. It was a lovely little cottage with a thatched roof and small leaded windows. The girls loved it the minute they saw it. It's just a bit like the house you bought for us, said Dinah. That's pretty too. Oh, Mother, we shall have a lovely time here. Won't the boys be thrilled? There was a fair-sized shed at the side into which Mrs. Mannering drove the car. Everyone got out. Leave the trunks for a bit, said Dinah's mother. The man who comes from the farm will carry them in. Now, welcome to Spring Cottage. 2. The boys come home and Kiki. That day and the morning of the next, the 2 girls spent in exploring their holiday home. It was certainly a tiny place, but just big enough for them. There was a large old-fashioned kitchen and a tiny parlour. Above were 3 small bedrooms. One for Mother, one for you and me, Lucy-Anne, and one for the boys, said Dinah. Mother's going to do the cooking and we're all to help with housework, which won't be much. Isn't our bedroom sweet? It was a little room tucked into the thatched roof, with a window jutting out from the thatch. The walls slanted in an odd fashion, and the ceiling slanted too. The floor was very uneven, and the doorways were low, so that Dinah, who was growing tall, had to lower her head under one or two in case she bumped it. Spring Cottage, she said. It's a nice name for it, especially in the springtime. It's named because of the spring that runs down behind it, said her mother. The water starts somewhere up in the yard of the castle, I believe, runs down through a tunnel it has made for itself and gushes out just above the cottage at the back. It runs through the garden then and disappears down the hillside. The girls explored the spring. They found where it gushed out and Dinah tasted the water. It was cold and crystal clear. She liked hearing the gurgling sound it made in the untidy little garden. She heard it all night long in her sleep and loved it. The view from the cottage was magnificent. They could see the whole of the valley below and could follow too the winding road that led up to their cottage. Far away in the distance was the railway station, looking like a toy building. Twice a day a train came into it, and it too looked like a toy. Just like the railway engine and carriages that Jack used to have, said Lucy-Anne, remembering. And how cross our old Uncle Geoffrey was when we used to set it going. He said it made more noise than a thunderstorm. Golly, I'm glad we don't live with him any more. Dinah looked at her watch. It's almost time to meet the train, she said. I bet the boys are feeling excited. Come on, let's find my mother. Mrs. Mannering was just about to go and get the car out. The girls packed themselves in beside her. Lucy-Anne felt terribly excited. She was so looking forward to being with Jack again, and with Philip too. It would be lovely to be all together once more. She did hope Dinah wouldn't fly into one of her tempers too soon. She and Philip quarrelled far too much. They arrived at the little station. The train was not yet signalled. Lucy-Anne walked up and down, longing to see the signal go down, and then, with an alarming clank, it did go down. Almost at the same moment, the smoke of the train appeared, and then, round the corner, came the engine, puffing vigorously, for it was uphill to the station. Both the boys were hanging out of the window, waving and shouting. The girls screamed greetings and capered about in delight. "There's Kiki!" shouted Lucy-Anne. "Kiki! Good old Kiki!" With a screech, Kiki flew off Jack's shoulder and landed on Lucy-Anne's. She rubbed her beak against the little girl's cheek and made a curious cracking noise. She was delighted to see her. The boys jumped out of the carriage. Jack rushed to Lucy-Anne and gave her a hug, which the little girl returned, her eyes shining. Kiki gave another screech and flew back onto Jack's shoulder. "Wipe your feet," she said sternly to the startled porter, "and where is your handkerchief?" Philip grinned at his sister Dinah. "Hello, old thing," he said. "You've grown. Good thing I have too, or you'd be as tall as I am. Hello, Lucy-Anne. You haven't grown. Been a good girl at school?" "Don't talk like a grown-up," said Dinah. "Mother's outside in the car. Come and see her." The porter took their trunks on his barrow and followed the 4 excited children. Kiki flew down to the barrow and looked at him with bright eyes. "How many times have I told you to shut the door?" she said. The porter dropped the handles of the barrow in surprise. He didn't know whether to answer this extraordinary bird or not. Kiki gave a laugh just like Jack's and flew out to the car. She joined the others and tried to get onto Mrs. Mannering's shoulder. She liked Dinah's mother very much. "Attention, please," said Kiki sternly. "Open your books at page 6. Everyone laughed. "She got that from one of the masters," said Jack. "Oh, Aunt Ally, she was so funny in the train. She put her head out of the window at every station and said, 'Right away there,' just as she had heard a guard say, and you should have seen the engine driver's face." "It's lovely to have you back," said Lucy-Anne, keeping close to Jack. She adored her brother, though he didn't really take a great deal of notice of her. They all got into the car, and the porter shoved the luggage in somehow, keeping a sharp eye on Kiki. "Please shut the door," she said, and went off into one of her never-ending giggles. "Shut up, Kiki," said Jack, seeing the porter's startled face. "Behave yourself, or I'll send you back to school." "Oh, you naughty boy," said Kiki. "Oh, you naughty, naughty, naughty. I'll put an elastic band round your beak if you dare to say another word," said Jack. "Can't you see I want to talk to Aunt Ally?" Jack and Lucy-Anne called Mrs. Mannering Aunt Ally because Mrs. Mannering seemed too stiff and standoffish. She liked both children very much, but especially Lucy-Anne, who was far more gentle and affectionate than Dinah had ever been. "I say, this looks exciting country," said Philip, looking out of the car windows. "Plenty of birds here for you, Freckles, and plenty of animals for me." "Where's that brown rat you had this term?" said Jack with a mischievous glance at Dinah. She gave a squeal at once. Philip began to feel about in his pockets, diving into first one and then the other, whilst Dinah watched him in horror, expecting to see a brown rat appear at any moment. "Mother, stop the car and let me walk," begged Dinah. "Philip's got a rat somewhere on him." "Here he is." "No, it's my hanky," said Philip. "Ah, what's this?" "No, that's not him. Now, here we are." He pretended to be trying to get something out of his pocket with great difficulty. "Ah, you'd bite, would you?" Dinah squealed again, and her mother stopped the car. Dinah fumbled at the door handle. "No, you stay in, Dinah," said her mother. "Philip, you get out and the rat too. I quite agree with Dinah. There ought to be no rats running all over us. So you can get out and walk, Philip." "Well, Mother, as a matter of fact, I've left the rat behind at school," said Philip with a grin. "I was just teasing Dinah, that's all." "Beast," said Dinah. "I thought you were," said his mother, driving on again. "Well, you nearly had to walk home, so just be careful. I don't mind any of your creatures myself, except rats or snakes. Now, what do you think of Spring Cottage?" The boys liked it just as much as the girls did, but it was a strange old castle that really took their fancy. Dinah forgot to sulk as she pointed it out to the boys. "We'll go up there," said Jack at once. "I think not," said Mrs. Mannering. "I've just explained to the girls that it's dangerous up there." "Oh, but why?" asked Jack, disappointed. "Well, there has been a landslide on the road, and no one dares to set foot on it now," said Mrs. Mannering. "I did hear that the whole castle is slipping a bit and might collapse if the road crumbles much more." "It sounds very exciting," said Philip, his eyes gleaming. They went indoors and the girls showed them to their room up in the roof. Lucy-Anne was so delighted to be with Jack that she could hardly leave him for a minute. He was very like her, with deep red hair, green eyes and hundreds of freckles. He was a very natural, kindly boy, and most people liked him at once. Philip, whom Jack often called Tufty, was very like his sister too, but much more even-tempered. He had the same unruly lock of hair in front, and even their mother had this, so that Jack often referred to them as the 3 Tufties. The boys were older than the 2 girls, and very good friends indeed. "Holidays at last," said Philip, undoing his trunk. Dinah watched him from a safe distance. "Got any creatures in there?" she asked. "Only a baby hedgehog, and you needn't worry. He's got no fleas," said Philip. "I bet he has," said Dinah, moving a few steps back. "I shan't forget that hedgehog we found last summer." "I tell you, this baby one hasn't got any fleas at all," said Philip. "I got some stuff from the chemist and powdered him well, and he's as clean as can be. His spines haven't turned brown yet." The girls looked with interest as Philip showed them a tiny prickly ball rolled up in his jerseys in the trunk. It uncurled a little and showed a tiny snout. "He's sweet," said Lucy-Anne. But even Dinah didn't mind him. The only snag about him is he's going to be awfully prickly to carry about with me, said Philip, putting the tiny thing into his shorts pocket. You'll probably stop carrying him about when you've sat on him once or twice, said Dinah. I probably shall, said Philip. And just see you don't annoy me too much, Di, for he'd be a marvellous thing to put into your bed. Shut up bickering, you two, and let's go out and explore, said Jack. Lucy-Anne says there's a spring in the garden that comes all the way down from the castle. I'm king of the castle, said Kiki, swaying gently to and fro on top of the dressing table. Pop goes the weasel. You're getting a bit mixed, said Jack. Come on, out we all go. 3. Settling in at Spring Cottage. The first day or two were very happy days indeed. The 4 children and Kiki wandered about as they pleased, and Jack found so many hundreds of nests that he marvelled to see them. He was mad on birds and would spend hours watching them if the others let him. He got very excited one day because he said he saw an eagle. An eagle? Said Dinah disbelievingly. Why, I thought eagles were extinct and couldn't be found any more. Like that great auk you always used to be talking about. Well, eagles aren't extinct, said Jack scornfully. That just shows how little you know. I'm sure this was an eagle. It soared up and up and up into the air just as eagles are said to do. I believe it was a golden eagle. Is it dangerous? Said Dinah. Well, I suppose it might attack you if you went too near its nest, said Jack. Golly, I wonder if it is nesting anywhere near here. Well, I'm not going eagle nesting, said Dinah firmly. Anyway, Jack, you've found about 100 nests already. Surely that's enough for you without wanting to see an eagle's nest as well. Jack never took birds' eggs, nor did he disturb the sitting birds at all. No bird was ever afraid of him, any more than any animal was ever afraid of Philip. If Lucy or Dinah so much as looked at the nest, the sitting bird seemed frightened and flew off. But she would allow Jack to stroke her without moving a feather. It was very odd. Kiki always came with them on their excursions, sitting on Jack's shoulder. He had taught her not to make a sound when he wanted to watch any bird, but Kiki seemed to object to the rooks that lived around. There was a large rookery in one clump of trees not far off, and Kiki would often go to sit on a nearby branch and address rude remarks to the astonished rooks. It's a pity they can't answer her back, said Philip, but all they say is caw, caw, caw. Yes, and Kiki says it too now, said Jack. She goes on cawing for ages unless I stop her. Don't you, Kiki? Kiki took Jack's ear into her sharp curved beak and fondled it gently. She loved Jack to talk to her. She made a cracking noise with her beak and said lovingly, caw, 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 caw. All right, that's enough, said Jack. Go and listen to a nightingale or something and imitate that. A rook's caw isn't anything to marvel at. Stop, Kiki. Kiki stopped and gave a realistic sneeze. Where's your hanky? Where's your hanky? She said. To Lucy-Anne's delight, Jack gave her a hanky, and Kiki spent the next minute or two holding it in her clawed foot and dabbing her beak with it, sniffing all the time. New trick, explained Jack with a grin. Good, isn't it? There were gorgeous walks around the cottage. It was about 3 miles to the little village, and except for the few houses and the one general shop there were no other houses save for a farm or two, and a lonely farm cottage here and there in the hills. We're not likely to have any adventures here, said Philip. It's all so quiet and peaceful. The village folk have hardly a word to say, have they? They say, ah, that's right, to everything. They're amazed by Kiki, said Dinah. That's right, said Jack, imitating the speech of the villagers. Kiki immediately did the same. Do you remember when Kiki got locked up in a cave underground and the man who locked her up heard her talking to herself and thought she was me? Said Jack, remembering the adventure of the summer before. My word, that was an adventure. I'd like another adventure, really, said Philip, but I don't expect we'll have another all our lives long. Well, they say adventures come to the adventurous, said Jack. And we are pretty adventurous, I think. I don't see why we shouldn't have plenty more. I wish we could go up and explore that strange castle, said Dinah longingly, looking up to where it towered on the summit of the hill. It looks such an odd place, so deserted and lonely, standing up there, frowning over the valley. Mother says something horrid once happened there, but she doesn't know what. We'll try and find out, said Jack promptly. He always liked hair-rising tales. I expect people were killed there or something. Ooh, how horrid! I don't want to go up there, said Lucy-Anne at once. Well, Mother said we weren't to anyhow, said Dinah. She might let us go eagle nesting, said Philip. And if our search took us near the castle, We couldn't very well help it, could we? We'd better tell her if we do go anywhere near, said Jack, who didn't like the idea of deceiving Philip's kindly mother in any way. I'll ask her if she minds. So he asked her that evening. Aunt Ellie, I believe there may be an eagle's nest somewhere on the top of this hill, he said. It's so high it's almost a mountain, and that's where eagles nest, you know. You wouldn't mind if I tried to find the nest, would you? No, not if you are careful, said Mrs. Mallory. But would your hunt take you anywhere near the old castle? Well, it might, said Jack honestly, but you can trust us not to fool about in any landslides, Aunt Ellie. We shouldn't dream of getting the girls into danger. Apparently there was a cloudburst on the top of this hill some years back, said Mrs. Mallory, and such a deluge of water fell that it undermined the foundations of the castle, and most of the road up to it slid away down the hillside. So you see, it really might be very dangerous to explore up there. We'll be very careful, promised Jack, delighted that Mrs. Mallory hadn't forbidden outright their going up the hill to the castle. He told the others, and they were thrilled. We'll go up tomorrow, shall we? Said Jack. I really do want to hunt about to see if there is any sign of an eagle's nest. That afternoon, in their wanderings, they had a curious feeling of being followed. Once or twice Jack turned around, sure that someone was behind them. But there was never anyone there. Funny, he said to Philip in a low voice. I felt certain there was someone behind us then. I heard the crack of a twig, as if someone had trodden on it and broken it. Yes, I thought so too, said Philip. He looked puzzled. I tell you what, Jack, when we get into that patch of trees, I'll crouch down behind a bush and stop, whilst you others go on. Then, if there's anyone following behind us for some reason, I'll see them. The girls were told what Philip was going to do. They too had felt that there was someone behind them. They all walked into the patch of trees, and then, when he came to a conveniently thick bush, Philip dropped down suddenly behind it and hid, whilst the others walked on, talking loudly. Philip lay there and listened. He could hear nothing at first, then he heard a rustle, and his heart beat fast. Who was it tracking them, and why? There didn't seem any sense in it. Someone came up to his bush. Someone crept past without seeing him. Philip gazed at the someone and was so astonished that he let out an exclamation. Well! A girl with ragged clothes, bare feet and wild curling hair jumped violently and turned round. In a trice Philip had jumped up and had hold of her wrists. He did not hold her roughly, but he held her too firmly for her to get away. She tried to bite him and kicked her out with her bare feet. "No, don't be silly," said Philip. "I'll let you go when you tell me who you are and why you are following us." The girl said nothing, but glared at Philip out of black eyes. The others, hearing Philip's voice, came running back. "This is the person who was following us, but I can't get a word out of her," said Philip. "She's a wild girl," said Dinah. The girl scowled at her. Then she glanced at Kiki on Jack's shoulder and stared as if she couldn't take her eyes off her. "I believe she was only following us to get a glimpse of the parrot," said Philip with a laugh. "Is that right, wild girl?" The girl nodded. "Ah, that's right," she said. "Ah, that's right," said Kiki. The girl stared and gave a laugh of surprise. It altered her face at once and gave her a merry, mischievous look. "What's your name?" asked Philip, letting go her wrists. "Tassie," said the girl. "I saw that bird and I came after you. I didn't mean no harm. I live round the hill with my mother. I know where you live. I know all you do." "Oh, been spying around a bit and following us, I suppose?" said Jack. "Do you know this hillside well?" Tassie nodded. Her bright black eyes hardly left Kiki. She seemed fascinated by the parrot. "Pop goes the weasel," said Kiki to her in a solemn voice. "Open your book at page 6. "I say, do you know of the eagle's nest on this hill?" asked Jack suddenly. He thought it quite likely that this wild little girl might know things like that. "What's an eagle?" said Tassie. "A big bird," said Jack. "A very big bird with a curved beak and—" "Like your bird there," said Tassie, pointing to Kiki. "Oh no," said Jack. "Well, never mind. If you don't know what an eagle is like, you won't know where it nests either." "It's time to go back home," said Philip. "I'm hungry. Tassie, take us the shortest way home." To Philip's surprise, Tassie turned round and plunged down the hillside as sure-footed as a goat. The others followed. She took them such a short-cut that all of them were amazed when they saw Spring Cottage in front of them. "Thanks, Tassie," said Philip, and Kiki echoed his words. "Thanks, Tassie." Tassie smiled, and her usual rather sulky look fled. "I'll see you again," she said, and turned to go. "Did you say you lived at that old cottage round the hill?" yelled Jack after her. "Ah, that's right," she shouted back, and disappeared into the bushes. Calabra.